in no order whatsoever. We have a senior Iranian general killed in a suspected Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus. This has prompted fears of an escalation of the Middle East crisis, with Iran promising a decisive response to the killing of Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahidi, who was with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and also 6 other officers from what are called the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Then we go to the hospital, the Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Reports that Israel's military has pulled out of that hospital after a 2-week raid that, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, has left the hospital effectively a shell, with dozens of bodies of innocent civilians being found. And again, this is in no particular order, it's just to give you the 3 main developments. A British volunteer is said to be among 5 aid workers who've died after an airstrike in the Gaza Strip. Again, according to Hamas-run government office, nationals from Poland and Australia were also killed. A Palestinian was driving the car, has been killed. The 5th person's nationality is as yet unknown. Should we start with the hospital? Now, after the IDF announced yesterday it concluded its operation at the Al-Shifa Hospital, this was the reaction from Dr Marwan Abu Sadar, the acting director of the medical complex.
Most of the buildings of the Al-Shifa Medical Complex were completely destroyed and burned, and there is such huge destruction in the buildings and facilities of the Ministry of Health that it is no longer possible to work in Al-Shifa Medical Complex. Al-Shifa Medical Complex is gone forever.
This was a testimony from 2 patients, Jana and Bara, who had been being treated at Al-Shifa Hospital as the IDF concluded their raid.
They didn't provide water for the last 2 days. There were sounds of shooting and bombing. The explosions from the artillery lit up the room we were in and shook the whole building.
They lit in a very small amount of food that wasn't enough. We were 150 patients and 50 medical staff. No treatment, no medicine, and constant bombing for 24 hours.
Well, I've just been informed as we're speaking, an interesting development of the IDF. I'll share that with you in a moment, but something that's not happened before. Later, yesterday, let's go back to the timeline for this. 2 Iranian generals were among 7 people killed in an airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus, capital of Syria, of course. And this, as I mentioned earlier, sparks fears of more escalation, tensions rising, fighting in the Middle East. Israel said it refused to comment on foreign media reports. But this was the reaction to that strike from Syria's Foreign Minister Faisal Mahdad and Hossein Akbari, the Iranian ambassador to Syria.
We strongly condemn this criminal act carried out by the Zionist enemy. These attacks can only be met with further steadfastness, further support for the Palestinian people, and further resistance, whether in Iraq or in southern Lebanon.
Definitely the Zionist regime knows better than anyone that such crimes and violating international law will have its response in an appropriate time.
And my apologies, the number of victims in that airstrike on aid workers has gone to 7, copy that's just been handed to me, so I apologise, that number is even now more grim than it was. This is 7 aid workers who were working with the US charity World Central Kitchen. The charity says, as we said earlier, one was British and Australian was also among those killed. Here's Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese speaking recently about the incident.
Australia expects full accountability for the deaths of aid workers and those doing humanitarian work, and indeed all innocent civilians need to be provided with protection.
And take from this what you will, but up until about a minute and a half ago, we were due to speak with Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, who's a spokesperson for the IDF, the Israeli Defence Forces, and that interview has just been cancelled with seconds' notice. As I say, take from that what you will, but certainly there are questions to be answered. Whether it's the tragic death of these aid workers, and I will read that an investigation is apparently going underway now, a thorough review. It would have been nice to speak to someone from that about more of that, wouldn't it? Or indeed the shell that is the Al-Shifa Hospital. It would have been quite informative to have been able to have a conversation with him about that as well. And goodness knows what we might see as a result of this supposed Israeli bombing of that consulate. in Damascus. Again, questions would have been asked, but the IDF decided to pull all interviews. 7:10. Let's turn then to Dr Nick Maynard. Dr Nick Maynard, who's a consultant surgeon in Oxford, regularly works in Gaza with medical aid for Palestinians and joins us now. Thank you for coming on, Doctor. The last time you were at Al-Shifa, how would you describe it then, and what are you picking up from sources and contacts as to how it is today? Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you for asking me on this morning. I last worked at Al-Shifa last May. I've been in Gaza only a few weeks ago, but that was at Al-Aqsa Hospital. We couldn't get to Shifa Hospital in the north during the current conflict. But I was there in May, operating in the operating theatres there, carrying out cancer surgery, and it is the biggest hospital in Gaza. It's the major trauma centre. It's older than the state of Israel. It's 78 years of age now. And it's a wonderful hospital with many talented doctors and nurses. So what has happened now is nothing short of tragic. It is an appalling state of affairs.
Have you been able to speak with any colleagues over there as to how the hospital, how it looks today?
Yes, I was in contact yesterday with Marwan Abu Sada, who we just heard being quoted. He's an old friend of mine. I've worked with him for many years. It has been completely destroyed. We thought it had been destroyed back in October, November, but of course they started working again then. But now it is a complete shell. I've seen photographs of it. Every single part of the hospital has been destroyed. The whole infrastructure of the hospital has been destroyed. When I spoke to Marwan yesterday, he told me there were 107 patients still in the hospital, 60 medical staff. God only knows what has happened to them. I think we've seen some of the pictures. Surgeons I know have been executed in the last 48 hours there. Bodies have been discovered in the last 12 to 24 hours who have been handcuffed with their arms behind their back. And so there is no doubt at all that multiple healthcare workers have been executed there in the last few days.
You believe executed by whom, Doctor?
By the Israeli Defense Force.
Why would they seek to execute surgeons and medical professionals?
Well, they've been doing it since October the 7th. Over 450 healthcare workers have been killed. Friends of mine that I have worked with over the years, many have been abducted as well, and nothing has been heard of them since. So there is no doubt in my mind, and I can bear witness from this from my time at Al-Aqsa Hospital and from talking to people, that there's been direct targeting of the healthcare system in Gaza, direct targeting of hospitals, and multiple killings of healthcare workers.
Any death is tragic, but this is not, and I say again, anyone dying in any sense. So this is not, and please don't be upset by this expression, collateral damage. This is specifically targeted, you're saying, medical professionals by the IDF to be taken off and executed, is your belief?
Most certainly, that is my belief.
When you worked at the other hospitals, have you at any time seen anything that would lead you to believe that there had been terrorists who were hiding in the hospital, that it was a depot for arms or whatever else of some of the allegations made by the IDF?
No, I mean, I understand why you're asking that. I have to say, it's very disappointing we keep being asked this, because this has been
I don't think I've asked you with respect, sir. I don't think I've asked you. But if I have, I'm sorry to repeat the question.
No, you haven't. I agree. But I've been asked this. But more importantly, many healthcare workers, such as me, who've been in Gaza since October the 7th, have been asked this. And without exception, every single one has responded to say they have never witnessed any Hamas militant in the hospitals they have worked in. My own experience, and I can only talk about my experience at the moment, I've never seen Hamas militants. When I was there in Al-Aqsa Hospital for 2 weeks, I saw no evidence of that. My multiple trips to Shifa Hospital over the years, I have never seen any evidence of Hamas militant activity. And also, it's worth saying, my access to every single part of those hospitals has been unrestricted throughout all the years I've been going there.
Great.
And the other thing to say is the evidence that the Israeli Defense Force has put forward to demonstrate the presence of Hamas militants is not remotely credible. And I'll quote two pieces of evidence. Back in early November, they showed a photograph of what they claimed was a Hamas tunnel leading directly into Shifa Hospital. And I recognize that as a ventilation shaft next to a hotel I stay in Gaza City. The second bit of evidence that I'd like to quote, and there's been multiple examples of this, they showed an MRI scanning unit in the Shifa Hospital with a load of weapons in there, putting that forward as evidence as an arms store. Now, an MRI scanner relies upon a huge magnet to work, and the idea that people would be storing metal guns next to a giant magnet is not remotely credible as evidence of that being used as an arms store. So no, they've provided no evidence.
Grateful for your time this morning. Thank you, Dr. Nick Maynard. Dr. Nick Maynard is a consultant surgeon in Oxford who's worked in Gaza with medical aid for Palestinians. Now, what would normally happen is that I would now be able to go to the IDF and say, what about this incendiary claim? And I've seen Gaza, but I've never visited Gaza, that the IDF are targeting medical professionals for execution. And the IDF could offer a comment. But they've chosen not to appear on the show. So I personally find it very hard to believe, but I'm not going to question the man who's worked there. What would be wonderful would be to have an IDF response, but they've chosen not to. Make of it what you will.